I have a pretty strong feeling a lot of my subscribers are Lumix shooters, and so when I switched from the Lumix S5 to the Sony A7IV, I'm sure there was a ton of you that were like, "Oh no!" And I think I may have possibly oversimplified why I got the A7IV in my A7IV review, because I kind of just put it down to autofocus. But I think there's a bigger conversation to be had between the Lumix S5 and the A7IV, and so let's have that conversation in this video. Something that happens with YouTube reviews and YouTubers that make videos about cameras is a lot of us speak to an experience with these cameras that is very particular to making YouTube videos. And I know a lot of you don't make YouTube videos. I'm sure a lot of you are photographers and filmmakers that want to make stuff for clients. They want to just make short films, whatever it is. It's not specifically filming themselves. And so I want to go at it from that experience, the idea of this being a camera for everything but YouTube. Because I think that's the differentiating factor for a camera like the A7IV and the Lumix S5. But they both have compromises. It's no secret that Panasonic has been the king of IBIS since even the GH5. I used to have a G85 with IBIS that absolutely slapped. And the Lumix S5 IBIS is stellar. It allows me to shoot things handheld that I would normally have to really rig up my camera for to give it some weight to that sway. Contrast that with the IBIS on the A7IV, it's almost night and day. The IBIS on this A7IV has burned me a few times, honestly. Like, it's so jittery, even when you think you're being still and steady. This thing just likes to jerk around a little bit. There's always still a little bit of micro jitters. It's actually very difficult to still fix it in post with post stabilization. It's actually doing something weird that even post stabilization has a hard time fixing it. Whereas with the S5, I've shot some stuff that literally looks like I shot it with a tripod, just sort of holding still, and it feels locked down. So without question, if you need IBIS and you're someone who's a run and gun shooter that needs steady footage and you don't want to use a gimbal, the S5 is absolutely stellar in this category, whereas I would say the A7IV is not the go-to for IBIS. You can use Catalyst Browse, which will then use the gyro to stabilize things, but for me, that's an extra added step that I'm not too keen on doing. You got to use their software. It's a big whole kind of fiasco that I'm just not into. It's an option there if you need it. I also don't like that you have to turn the stabilization off in the camera, so you're kind of just like hoping when you get into Catalyst Browse that it's gonna look steady. It's just not a good user experience in my opinion. So in the world of IBIS, the compromise is A7IV looks like crap, the S5 looks awesome. Let's take a second to pay some bills and thank the sponsor of today's video, NordVPN. I've been using NordVPN for nearly 6 years now. You guys know I love watching movies so I can get inspired for short films and videos, but oftentimes when streaming, the movie you want to watch isn't available in your country. This is something that happens all the time in Canada. But with NordVPN, you can change your location virtually and basically travel the world with different streaming sites. All you have to do is go to nordvpn.com/Tomasso, download the app for your device, and then just open the map, click on a location, and you'll be connected in seconds. It's that easy. On top of all that, you also get the peace of mind that your data and internet activity are all secure. So go to nordvpn.com/Tomasso to get a 2-year plan plus 1 additional month with a huge discount. And best of all, it's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Thank you again to NordVPN for sponsoring this video. Okay, the next compromise is autofocus. And this is where, a lot of us will sort of boil this down to. It's, are you filming yourself? Are you in run and gun situations where you just need to point the camera at something and hope that it's in focus because you don't have time to pull focus yourself? Or you're not on set with a crew that has an actual focus puller that can deal with that for you? Then go with the Sony. There's no question here. I don't care what people say about Panasonic's autofocus, that you can set it up in certain ways and play with settings, all that stuff to make it usable. No, I'm not making excuses anymore. The Panasonic autofocus system is trash. But now let's talk about some other compromises and sort of extra expansion features that each of these camera offers if it's a camera you want to keep for a very long time and grow with you as a filmmaker and a creative. The really interesting thing about the Lumix S5 is that even though on surface it feels like a mirrorless hybrid camera, much like the A7IV, the potential for this to be a borderline cinema camera, if not a full-out cinema camera, is awesome. This thing will shoot 6K B-RAW, 6K ProRes RAW over HDMI. There is no RAW HDMI capability out of the A7 IV. There are anamorphic modes on the S5, which the A7 IV does not have. There's shutter angle instead of the old school photo shutter speed. And so as a dedicated video camera, I have to give that to the S5. I would also say, and as an overall thing, I don't really want to get into image quality differences because I think both cameras absolutely do a stellar job. But if I was just, maybe it's psychological, I do think the S5 just looks a hair better than the A7 IV in terms of like a cinema look. But that's totally subjective. And I would argue that the A7 IV is absolutely perfect. I have never had an issue with the image quality coming out of this camera. I think it looks awesome. But psychologically, there's something about Vlog and the S5 that I don't know. There's a distinction to it that I really, really like. But that could be entirely psychological. And that's why I really don't like to do image quality comparison tests. Because at the end of the day, if you saw this in isolation, if you saw the S5 in isolation, you're going to think they both look fantastic. And that's really all that matters. It's not this like side-by-side comparison where we're pixel peeping things. I don't subscribe to that. So if you are a filmmaker who wants a camera that's going to become the cinema camera that you need one day as you grow, I would say go with the S5. And that's where the autofocus question comes back into play, because if you are doing dedicated filmmaking, I don't really think critical autofocus is that important anymore, because you will want to be in control of the focus when you're doing narrative filmmaking work and even commercial work. So in those situations, I'm turning autofocus off anyways, and I'm manually focusing, or I'm having someone on set as a focus puller deal with that for me. And on top of that, I love to use like vintage lenses and stuff like that, which will manually focus anyways. I can't even autofocus if I wanted to. And that's where, if it comes to work and production and filmmaking, I will always go to the S5. I just feel like it's a better professional video camera than the A7 IV. Even though the A7 IV is entirely capable at all of those things too. You can easily get by the idea of not having shutter angle. It's really not a big deal. I don't think you always need to shoot raw. I've been having a great time with the H.265 codec in the A7 IV, much like I did with the S5. These things are professional features that if you need them, you want to be professional. There's a case to be made that you probably aren't even buying a sub $2,000 mirrorless camera anyways. And so it's amazing that Panasonic is offering all those features in an affordable, cheap sort of consumer level camera. But it kind of begs the question of like, who's the audience for that? Because I think a lot more people want the stuff that an A7 IV offers over those sort of professional cinema quality features that the S5 has. But then what makes the S5 kind of weird too is that there's recording limits, right? You can only do 30 minutes of recording time in 4K, right? So if you want to do unlimited recording, you got to go to HD, which is very odd to me. I don't know if it's a heat issue or what that's about, or if it's just some sort of way to make you buy an S1 or an S1H instead of the S5, which I'm not a big fan of. Whereas with the A7 IV, this thing will record as long as your SD card is. And also, neither of them have ever overheated on me. I've never had an overheating issue with the A7 IV, nor with the S5 in 4K, just letting these things run. The S5, I've had interviews where I've shot, 4 hours worth of footage, and that thing's never crapped out of me. But it's annoying that I have to restart that recording every 30 minutes, whereas with the A7 IV, this thing would just go. So if you can get past that 30-minute limit, I still think the S5 is the better video camera. Okay, price. There's not a massive difference in price between the A7 IV and the S5. We're talking $500. And I know $500 is not a little amount of money. You could get some really nice lenses for either system for $500. And lenses are a whole other conversation themselves. I don't think L mount is that bad. I know a lot of people have issues with L mount. I have not had an issue with L mount. And look, if you're looking for more affordable third-party lenses, I would probably go with Sony. So there's an ecosystem question to be thought about as well. But in my experience, I'm still a big fan of L mount, and I have a lot of hope for the future of L mount too. I think they're coming out with some really, really great lenses. On top of that, I threw the L mount Sigma 24-70 on the S5, and it barely ever comes off. So as long as you get those key primes and zooms, I think L mount is fantastic. The one cool thing about Sony in the price category of lenses is that there's just more third-party options. So like I'm using these Rokinons now that were like less than $300-400, right? And I think they work great, and they autofocus just fine. And so when it comes down to price, it's a little kind of quirky and complicated. But at the end of the day, if you're looking for a sub $2,000 camera that plays with the big guns and plays with cinema cameras, yeah, definitely go with the S5. But for only $500 more, you are getting that critical autofocus that works fantastic. And on top of that, you're getting that system of lenses that is a lot more affordable too. So you might actually end up saving money in the long run by going with Sony than Panasonic, which is, you'd have to crunch the numbers yourself of what lens you actually need, but it's something to definitely ponder. Now look, there's a lot of little quirks and bells and whistles we could talk about with each of these cameras that I'm sure is important to a lot of you, but ultimately it always comes down to the practicality of the camera, and on top of that, which camera inspires you to film things. Right now, honestly for me, and I'm sure it's apparent in the last few videos that I've put out, the idea that I can kind of just put this thing somewhere, point it at myself, and I can film, and I know it's going to be in focus, and I know it's going to look great, that's inspiring me right now. Whereas with the Panasonic, if I'm behind the camera and I'm filming things, 100%, I absolutely love the S5 for photo, for video. Both of these cameras are stellar photo cameras too. We're not even gonna get into all of that. They're great photo cameras. Nothing to be concerned about on the photo side of either of these cameras. But I think really what it comes down to is if you're someone who's in front of a camera, go with the A7IV. If you're someone who wants to be behind a camera and you're filming things, go with the S5. If you want both, I think you have to go with the A7IV now, or any Sony camera or any Canon or Nikon that has autofocus. I just truly think that in 2022, if you're some sort of creative that needs to film themselves, you need critical autofocus. So that's the deal breaker right there. It's autofocus. So if Panasonic at some point wakes up and puts some sort of phase detect or dual pixel in their cameras, it's game over. Panasonic will take the lead. They are winning in almost every other category. So it's really the only thing that they're missing. But I also have to give kudos to Sony because they've made an absolutely stellar camera with this A7IV, and they've been making great cameras even since the A7S III. The Venice line is really great, FX3, FX6. All those cameras are awesome. So really it's just a chess move now. The ball is in Panasonic's court to see what happens next. And so ultimately, I think for now, I'm gonna use the S5 for work. So I'm gonna use that for my production stuff for clients. And I'm gonna use the A7IV for YouTube. I hope this kind of perspective helped a little bit. I know it's a bit complicated. Like I said, YouTubers like to give you this perspective of a YouTuber. So I tried to kind of balance between those two worlds that I also operate in. And I think it's kind of a simple idea. If you're behind the camera, S5. If you're in front of the camera, A7IV. But I think that's gonna wrap up this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any more questions about either of these cameras, please let me know in the comments, and you will obviously see more content from both of them to come. And yeah. My name is Pastor Tomasso. I hope you like this video, and you will see or hear me next time I feel like making a video. Cheers.